My name is Dan Roger. I'm one of three directors in our multiple employer plan division at Transamerica Retirement. Thank you for taking some time today to talk a little bit about multiple employer plans, open multiple employer plans, exchanges, PEPs, and what might be coming down the pike. We're going to spend the next half hour going through the differences, the pros and cons, and where you might want to use these various instruments that are available to us now. I'll have a presentation. I'll go about 25 minutes, and then we'll answer questions in the Q&A as best we can. I want everybody to know that we'll send a copy of the presentation out to you all. We're going to get your emails and send you a PDF of the presentation, as well as we'll answer any unanswered questions that have come through the Q&A that we don't have time to address today. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is talk a little bit about the history of these pooled asset plans, give a primer on the plans themselves, advantages, disadvantages, and how you might be able to use them in your practices going forward. You know, multiple employer plans have gotten a lot of press lately with the Secure Act and a number of other things, and Secure 2.0 coming up, but they've actually been around since the early 20th century. We as a group at Transamerica 20 years ago decided to focus on multiple employer plans. Nobody was really building a chassis specifically for them. And so, you know, we have been kind of a dominant player in this place over the last 20 years and been very influential in working with the House, the Senate, and various subcommittees on the legislation that's come to fruition, everything from RESA to the Secure Act to now Secure 2.0 that might be coming down the pike. So let's talk a little bit about kind of these different types of plans and why they're so popular these days, and why the politics don't seem to be as antagonistic between the Democrats and Republicans. I think they all agree on Capitol Hill that we need to find a way for people to start saving for retirement and make it easier for employers and easier for employees, and try to remove some of the obstacles that have been set up to sponsor a plan, help people get into plans easier, and reduce that savings gap that's out there right now. Indeed, when the Secure Act went through the House, I think there were only 3 negative votes onto it. It's one of the more popular legislations out there, and we think Secure 2.0 is going to pass also this year at some point with the same type of majority. These type of pooled asset plans really have a triad of benefits in common. There's 3 things that are the hallmark of all these types of plans, no matter how the name is structured into it. One is potential cost savings. It just makes sense that if I've got a $500,000 plan, Joe has a $3 million plan, and Judy's got a $5 million plan, and we pool our assets together, we're probably going to get a better price than if we were out in the market individually. And we've seen that in these plans to date. But most importantly, I think, are the other 2 facets of these types of plans. One is saving time. These plans are all about outsourcing day-to-day plan administration. Most of these plans will have some sort of 316 administrative fiduciary onto them, as well as an investment fiduciary. Somebody that's going to be there to approve loans, distributions, quadros, send out mandatory notices, track eligibility, take that day-to-day administrative burden off of the employer and put it into professional outsourcing hands. Same thing for fiduciary support. As I said, most of these plans will have a 316 and a 338 or 321 and a fiduciary onto them. Again, taking that off of the plate of the plan sponsor and putting it into professional hands going forward onto it. So I think with that triad of benefits becomes very attractive for businesses today. You know, we've got a kind of an alphabet soup. We love our acronyms in this business. Single employer plans, multiple employer plans, what we call exchanges at Transamerica, or people call open MEPs, pool employer plans, and then within the pooled employer plan, the pooled plan provider. So we're going to kind of hit on each one of these and kind of where the status of them are right now. Now, traditional closed multiple employer plans, they've been around for a long time. As I said, they were back in the turn of the 19th century. But here, you take a look at the basics of the MEP, okay? Typically, they're defined contribution plans, but they can be defined benefit plans, and we've seen a number of defined benefit plans out there, but mostly they're defined contribution 401k profit sharing plans. and they cover companies that have some sort of commonality, some nexus of interest. But they're probably not commonly owned, okay? At least not enough to be a control group. So when you look at, well, what type of entities can sponsor this sort of plan? We typically kind of lump them into three groups. There's associations, cooperatives, chambers of commerce, and those sort of groups, because of the membership bylaws, are able to sponsor a plan for their members. As long as the association is set up for something other than just the retirement plan, and you can basically take a look at these sort of associations and say, well, what are members benefit from a plan like this? And chambers of commerce are one that's very hot in the industry these days. We do a lot of consultation with chambers of commerce out there. The DOL ruling in July of 2019 specifically mentioned chambers being able to do plans for their members. So we see a lot of interest in that part too. We'll delve into it a little deeper here in a minute. PEOs, professional employer organizations. These are kind of co-employment scenarios where these PEOs handle the heavy lifting of most of the benefits that are involved with different companies. And one of the sources that they want to have as a way to have that retirement plan is one of their offerings out there. And then you get what's called non-common control. There's a common ownership, but not enough to be a control group. So somebody might own 5 different car dealerships, a portion of each. Instead of having 5 different 5500s and 5 different audits, they look and see if they could form into a multiple employer plan, 1 tax filing, 1 audit at the end of the day. A lot of what I see on a daily basis, I basically cover everything west of the Mississippi for Transamerica, are associations and chambers coming to us and saying, okay, we've got some concerns. You know, it's been a rough year, obviously. Our members are hurting. They've had to lay off people. They've had a lot of restrictions onto them, and they're taking a look at their dues and looking to make sure that they can justify paying these sort of association dues. Having these plans available is a very strong way to tie those members into the retirement plan and tie them into the association or chamber. You know, when you get business owner conversations, they talk about healthcare, they talk about limited resources, they talk about liability out there. These plans are all designed to help basically offload responsibility and yet offer a benefit that their employees will see as a true benefit for themselves. If you look at these associations, co-ops, chambers, as I said, there needs to be that common nexus. They need to have a connection. There should be an organized, formal structure to it with bylaws. And you have to be a member of the association or chamber in order to participate in the plan. If you lose your membership, you're going to be told you have to move your assets out of the plan within a certain time frame, usually a 6-month type of time frame. Now, in this case, when you look at who can sponsor a plan, it can't be a financial services firm or bank, broker dealer, record keeper, can't be a benefit house. It has to be an association, co-op, or chamber that's built for other purposes out there. Okay, we'll get to PEPs in a minute because PEPs help try to fill that gap of who can sponsor what. All right, now you've got a number of things to consider when these plans are set up. One is prohibited transaction rules. We can't pay the plan sponsor of the plan out of the plan assets unless some very, very defined steps are followed to make sure that payment is justified according to the Department of Labor. This is really an exploding vertical out there. That number is from 2019. I imagine there's over 250 different association MEPs in the US. I've got a ton of them on my desk. Thankfully, you can't see it because of the screensaver behind me. But we do a lot in this business. We've got roughly 20% of the overall association business. So if you want to talk to us about that, we'd be happy to talk to you. PEOs, again, these can be great inroads for financial advisors because these PEOs need to sponsor a plan. In a lot of cases, they don't have somebody on staff that knows anything on the investment side, knows anything about really the retirement plan side of things. So they team up with financial advisors in order to basically offer a plan out to their employers. And there's a kind of a substantial functionality of these 4 things that if the PEO is doing that, then they're able to take that client and put it under their roof as a closed multiple employer plan provider. So when we talk to PEOs, we talk to them about the employment functions, we talk to them about how things are set up, and we talk to them about how you might want to use financial advisors to help this. But from an advisor side, you've got then a new entity out there helping to bring in clients for you and for your multiple employer plan. Again, the numbers are a little old. There's probably about 325 or so PEOs they're sponsoring MEPs in the US today. We roughly have about 20% of that business overall. So we'd love to talk to you about anything that you have opportunity-wise for that. By far the biggest amount of multiple employer plans out there are common ownership. Not enough to be a control group, but there's common ownership. Represents a huge portion of the total multiple employer plans out there. Are very, very large plans that are involved with it. Southwest Airlines, for example, is a multiple employer plan. We see, though, in a lot of cases, they get kind of shoved into divisional accounting type of scenarios where everybody has to have the same eligibility entry formulas, and they don't have to at the end of the day. Systems like ours can handle taking that and having different eligibility, different entry, different compliance issues for each of the individual adopters. So there's a definite opportunity out there to look at that type of business also. Now, let's take a look for a moment at retirement plan exchanges, okay? That's a term we use here at Transamerica for generally what's called an open MEP. It's got the same type of benefits that you might have within the closed multiple employer plan, okay? You get the administrative outsourcing, fiduciary outsourcing. You've got a common 316, a common 338, but in this case, that from a sponsoring side, there's not one overall plan sponsor. So it's really kind of almost like a 401k in a box, where you've got a plan administrator, you've got a record keeper, a financial advisor can come in, a TPA, investment manager, auditor, all under one roof. And you've got the benefits of aggregating those assets together in order to get a better price for everybody. And we've been doing these since 2006. We've got a number of these type of exchanges available. And if you want to look at creating one within your own entity, we'd be happy to talk to you about that also. It's a very growing business. These exchanges you're going to find are going to become very, very popular, especially if what's called the group of plans provisions comes through from the Secure Act in 2022 that might allow these exchanges to have one audit and one 5500, really look, smelling and feeling just like a closed multiple employer plan. Let's talk about kind of the new kid on the block, which is the pooled employer plan side of things, okay? Basically, what the pooled employer plan did is take away that common business nexus requirement that was in the closed multiple employer plan side. So, okay, let's take that away. These companies don't have to be connected in any way, shape, or form. Allow them to sponsor a plan and have unrelated businesses come into the plan overall to get the benefits that we've talked about, the price reductions, hopefully the administrative offload, the fiduciary offload. Now, part of the law has been clarified quite a bit by the Department of Treasury and the Department of Labor. Part of it hasn't. This law came into effect in late at night towards the end of December in 2019. We were starting to get some clarity on it in early 2020, and then COVID hit. And rightfully, the focus of the DOL came to things like the CARES Act and kind of pushed this off to the side. Now we're getting more and more conversations about clarity on the Secure Act and on clarity on pooled employer plans. One of the things that's a little unusual is you have to have what's called a pooled plan provider, the named fiduciary of the plan, the 3P, some people call them. You have to have a trustee who's responsible for collecting contributions from the participating employers. And the participating employers do retain some fiduciary responsibility for selection and monitoring the pooled plan provider and any other named fiduciaries and the investment side of things too. One of the things that's been out there is, and it's been kind of a sword over the head of multiple employer plans and plans of this type for years, is what's called the one bad apple rule, which basically states, hey, if I've got this multiple employer plan with 10 employers, but employer number 8 over here doesn't follow the rules, does that have a chance for tainting all the total plan and maybe having the Department of Labor and the IRS come in and talk to us about disqualifying the plan? Well, in the Secure Act, they came out and said starting in 2021, so right now, there is relief from the one bad apple rule. If somebody does something improperly, you can spin them out of your plan. It doesn't taint the rest of the plan going forward. So that's been a relief for really everybody looking to sponsor one of these types of plans. The registration process of the pool plan provider, now that's been cleared up quite a bit. At first it would look pretty onerous. We came back and said, now that seems like way more than you're asking of a typical plan sponsor. They came back with some different requirements. It's much more reasonable. Actually, if you go to the ERISA site, FAST site from the Department of Labor, and go on to it, where you might look up typically retirement plans and their 5500s. There's a drop-down box now for those who have signed up as a pooled plan provider. So you can actually see their registration as a pooled plan provider. There's still some things that need to be clarified. One of the things the law says it may allow for a simplified 5500. We're not sure what that may means. Does it or doesn't it? There's audit requirements that tend to be relaxed if there's less than 1,000 eligibles and no adopting employer is over 100 eligible participants themselves. But we need some clarification on that. If there's 2 or 3 employers that are in that case, is there just one audit or is there 2 or 3 audits? Yeah. Some of the disclosure requirements we're looking at are pending. Some of the basic conversation of should we sponsor this sort of plan? There's really a lot that's up in the air at this point. We need to get some clarifications on things, particularly on what duties the pooled plan provider can take. Can they get paid out of the assets of the plan, or is that a prohibited transaction? Disclosure requirements, audit requirements, how does the 5500 look? All that still needs to be clarified out there. So let's kind of take a quick look at advantages and disadvantages of each that we've talked about today. The closed MEP, okay? You can brand it, you can retain clients, attract new clients in, you get the cost reduction, you can actually have that sort of cost reduction spread amongst all your members out there. From an employer side, you reduce your fiduciary liability, you outsource the administration side. There's one audit. So if I'm a company that's been paying $10,000, $12,000 a year for my own individual audit, there's only one audit for the entire closed MEP, and there's only one 5500 for the entire closed MEP. There are some disadvantages, okay? If you don't have the right structure and don't have somebody like a 316, investment fiduciary also, and some record keeper that can actually handle taking on that outsourced administration, it can become a nightmare burden. It is a different world of doing a plan with 100, 200, 300 adopters into it than doing a single employer plan. There's typically one investment menu for everybody, so there's no flexibility there. The startup credit that's out there right now, that's probably going to be corrected. Initially, if you looked at the Secure Act, it was unsure whether that would count for a company that's starting a plan going into a MEP. That if the MEP had been around for 3 years, Secure 2.0 actually corrects that, says yes, it will for multiple employer plans. One of the things is vesting and eligibility is tracked at the whole MEP level. So if I'm in company A and I've been there for 3 years and I go to company B, and company B is part of the same multiple employer plan, I got 3 years vesting at company B. That can be a disadvantage. That can be an advantage in helping recruit people into the business. And there is an audit for a full plan regardless of the employer size. If you get up to your 100 plus individuals, there's going to be an audit. So what you don't want to do at the end of the day typically is get a bunch of very small businesses together and get enough of them that you have to have an audit when none of them would have had to have an audit in the first place anyway. The exchange or open MEP, if you take a look at it, you've got a lot of the abilities to do things like private labeling. You've got the ability to have a lot of the offload of responsibilities to 316, 338, 321 fiduciaries out there. In some cases, you've got the ability to get some non-reduced revenue, either by charging an extra membership fee or a marketing charge or something of that type. You do get the startup credit. Each individual company has its own 5500, but on the bright side, if they don't have an audit status, they're not going to have to pay for any portion of an audit. And then probably in 2022 in these, you're probably going to wind up having them labeled as groups of plans and be a consolidated audit. Disadvantages, there's really the same type of scenarios before. There's a set lineup of service providers. There's a set investment lineup. In this case, you don't have to be members of a certain association to be part of an exchange or open MEP, so there's no membership tie-in, handcuff type of thing. You still may have an audit if you join in 2021. Probably not, though, in 2022. And you've got limited plan sponsor responsibilities, but you do have more than you might have just as an adopting employer in a closed MEP. Finally, the pooled employer plan. There you've got no common nexus requirement, the ability to attract, retain members. And so, ideally, when this was all formed, this was really for banks, broker-dealers, TPAs, benefit houses to look at sponsoring these for their clients. Some have jumped into the pool and basically said, well, we're going to do what we can, given the restrictions that we have and what we know. And then we'll change if we have to going forward. But a lot of providers have stepped back and said, well, I don't know if we want to be the pooled plan provider or we just want to be a section of this. Maybe we just want to be the 338. Maybe as TPA, we just want to do the 316 side of this. So there's still a lot of clarification that has to happen on the pooled employer plan, particularly, as I mentioned before, how you can get paid and making sure it's not a prohibited transaction. But there's a lot of positives to it. And from a disadvantage side, a lot of that falls onto the pooled plan provider. Are you willing and able to do things like register with the Treasury, meet all the requirements, make sure you've got the procedures in place? So you'll see there's about 60 or so firms so far that have stepped up and actually made a registration as a pooled employer plan, PPP. We'll probably see much. So when you're talking about your prospects, I think the things to think about are, kind of what their objectives are, what's the structure of that type of organization, how much success are you going to have and commitment from the different associations, even into a pooled employer plan, are they going to be into it with you as a marketing partner? What type of companies are we looking at? Are they audited companies or non-audited companies? There's a lot of things to consider. So, what we'd love to do at some point is have you talk to your local and take a look with the opportunity with you. If you're in my location here in the Western U.S., they'd come through me and we talk about it. We've got 2 other fantastic individuals across the country that can also help you to talk about the pros and cons. One of the things we've been doing it for 20 years. We've done it the wrong way. We've done it the right way. We know the pitfalls that are out there. So we'd love to be working with you going forward on any of these types of consider the entire scenario on the Transamerica side, other than say, we are one of the leaders in the industry today. We have been doing this for over 20 years. Roughly 25% of our new business each year in the retirement plan side comes from our existing and onboarding new multiple employer plans. So if you have questions in that area, we would love to sit down and have a conversation with you and try to see if we could help you out in any way that we can. Left, I was going to go and see if during the Q&A side, if there's any open questions there. I don't see any at this point onto it. Know that I'll give you my information here. My email is dan.roger, dan.roger, @transamerica.com. My phone number is 602-403-3831. We will send out to you a copy of the presentation so that you have that. If you have an interest, let us know. We'll connect you with your local RVP from Transamerica, and we'd love to talk through any of the materials. Yes, so we will definitely, there's a question from Peter about sending materials. We will send materials on this information. We've also got what we call a white paper on pooled employer plans, MEPs, single employer plans, exchanges, so we'll include that with it. We, from our side, are not going to sponsor a pooled employer plan at this time. What we are doing is that are looking to do a plan of this type. So typically we've got conversations with benefit houses and a number of other types of operations that are looking at saying, well, we might want to either have a plan for our clientele. Maybe we'll be the pool plan provider, maybe not, but we know you've got the chassis to make it work over here. So we can definitely talk to you in detail about any particular opportunity that you have. I don't see any other questions at this point. I really do want to thank everybody for signing on today. We greatly appreciate it. We'll get all the materials out to you, and everybody stay safe and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.